We have Representative Hansen here today to present House File 2502. And so since she's not in our committee, I will go ahead and move that House File 2502 be laid over for possible inclusion. And I see there is a DE1. So I'll go ahead and move the DE1 and get the bill in the shape that the author would like to consider it. Any discussion? Let's see. So yes, I move the DE1. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the DE1 say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. So welcome, Representative Hansen. Go ahead and tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members. It's an honor to be before this committee for my first time, and I'm so sorry I didn't bring the snacks. I know that's the rule, but we ran short on time today, so I owe you. This bill is a program for electric school buses that builds on the success of the Solar for Schools program that demonstrated that there's a real local interest in using cleaner technologies in our kids' environments. An electric bus program that was funded by the Volkswagen settlement proved popular when in 2020, 8 electric school buses were awarded to 5 districts across the state. There's growing momentum to continue to invest in electric buses and to protect our kids from diesel fumes. Electric buses are no longer just a vehicle of the future. They're a growing part of bus fleets around the United States. As many of you may recognize, I don't do a lot of work in this committee's space. However, I serve on the Children and Families Committee and the Human Services Committees, where we hear every single meeting about the barriers to health and wellness that kids around Minnesota face on a regular basis. I've talked on the House floor about the importance of doing all we can to protect and provide for our kids. But the work doesn't just stop at improving things in those DHS-related arenas. We have to do more, and that means that we need to take action on initiatives like this. And that's why I agreed to work on this with the fabulous community members who are here with me today, and I know a bunch are watching online as well. Diesel buses expose children to dangerous diesel fumes. Studies have shown that students who were exposed to lower diesel bus emissions had 8% fewer absent school days, better lung function testing, and improved academic test scores. As much as the mom in me wants to dive into the importance of protecting our kids' lungs and health, I won't go into too much detail since my testifier will, and I'm going to stay in my lane and just go over the details of the bill. This bill does 5 things to accomplish the goal of reducing the number of buses that expose our children to harmful diesel fuels. First, it creates a grant program at the Department of Commerce with general fund money. The utility funds may also be made available by PUC-approved cost recoveries. Second, it allows the Department of Commerce to award grants to school districts, student transportation service providers, electric vehicle service providers, or utilities that want to install or operate electric buses and electric vehicle infrastructure to serve a school district. Third, the awards are prioritized for districts with higher rates of student poverty, rural districts, and districts funded by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Fourth, it supports districts who are eligible to receive grants to cover 75 to 95% of the cost of replacing or repowering buses that use fossil fuels. And lastly, districts can apply to participate in 2 grant cycles per year. The Department of Commerce would administer this process and provide technical assistance throughout. Minnesota is a North Star state. It's in our nature to lead. This bill does just that. In 2022, $1 billion of the IIJA funds were awarded nationally as a part of the Clean School Bus program. Minnesota only received $1.6 million to purchase 4 electric buses, while Wisconsin received $25 million for 65 buses, and Michigan got $54 million for 138 buses. You'll see in the handout with the pictures on it some of the differences for other states. We can do better for Minnesota kids, and this bill is a step towards just that. So thank you for your time today, committee members and chair, and with that, I'll turn it over to my testifier.
Thank you, Representative. And Dr. Dan Trajano is with us. Go ahead and state your name for the record and proceed.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair Acom and committee members. I'm Daniel Trajano, Dr. Daniel Trajano from Savage, Minnesota. I am a retired family physician and a University of Minnesota and University of St. Thomas professor. I volunteer on health and environmental advocacy with MN350, Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate, and the 100% campaign. As a physician and a teacher, I am proud of Minnesota's rich history of excellence in education and health. However, we are way behind other states when it comes to pursuing school transportation that will significantly improve children's health and academics. And I urge you to pass House File 2502 to improve children's health and education by accelerating Minnesota's transition to zero-emission electric school buses. Every day, every school day, hundreds of thousands of Minnesota K-12 students are exposed to harmful diesel emissions to and from schools. The health impact from these emissions also harms drivers and school employees. It is even worse for students of color and low-income students who are already disproportionately exposed to high levels of air pollution. For example, data has shown that kids living in North Minneapolis and the Phillips neighborhoods, predominantly BIPOC communities, experience asthma hospitalizations at 5 times the rate as Minnesotans across the state. Asthma-inducing particulate matter levels are up to 15 times higher inside the cab of a diesel school bus. There have been large-scale randomized trials that have shown that students who are exposed to lower diesel emissions have fewer absent school days, better lung function, and better test scores. And diesel particulate matter increases the risk of numerous other health conditions, including asthma, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and birth anomalies. And converting all of the U.S. school bus fleet to zero-emission buses will eliminate over 5 million tons of harmful carbon emissions. Several states have recently passed electric school bus legislation, including New York, which is committed to achieving a fully zero-emission school bus fleet by 2035. And they passed an additional $500 million of state funding for electric school buses. Colorado passed funding for an additional $65 million in initial funding for grant program and a technical assistance program for schools. And Governor Whitmore in Michigan just recently announced that she is planning to include $150 million in electric school bus funding in her 2023 budget. So for the sake of Minnesota children's health and education, I urge legislators to pass Representative Hansen's electric school bus bill, HF2502. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trujano. Next, we have Brooke Roper. And Brooke has a companion here.
Yes. Sorry.
Welcome to committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
All right. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Hi.
Introduce your friend, too.
Yes. So I'm Brooke Roper, and this is my son, Corey, CJ. It is my pleasure to be here today to provide this important testimony to the committee and want to thank you for this opportunity. Again, my name is Brooke Roper. I'm the parent of Corey, CJ, and Brooklyn Roper, and a supporter of MN 350. During the winter of 2022, my husband and I experienced paralyzing fear when our 4-year-old son, CJ, suddenly experienced difficulty breathing. He was immediately taken to Children's Hospital emergency room, where doctors believed it was reaction to the sick bug that was going around. Afterward, we took CJ home and monitored his breathing extremely closely. Several months later, CJ experienced a similar breathing episode, and doctors began to suspect asthma. In the end, CJ was officially diagnosed with asthma after several more doctor visits and incidents. As a mother and asthma survivor, I am committed to ensuring that my son's asthma remained well controlled and managed responsibly. Although CJ does not ride the bus consistently, he has ridden the bus for field trips and activities, and I immediately noticed a difference in his breathing when he inhaled the heavy fumes from the bus. As CJ is eager to ride the bus with his friends, my husband Corey and I are very hesitant about putting him on the school bus as his primary mode of transportation for the next school year. We have a shared responsibility of ensuring that our students have the chance to breathe clean air. Diesel has a huge impact on existing health conditions such as asthma, and Minnesota's K-12 student population is exposed daily to harmful diesel emissions to and from school. These emissions also harm drivers and school employees. It is even worse for students of marginalized communities who are already disproportionately exposed to high levels of air pollution. According to recent national data from the American Lung Association, Black people are 42% more likely than whites to have asthma and a mortality rate of from asthma 2.8 times that of white people. Electrifying school buses will help reduce this disparity. In Minnesota, zip codes with the largest percentage of minority residents had more than 5 times the rate of asthma emergency room visits related to air pollution compared to areas with more white residents, according to the 2022 Life and Breath Report by the Minnesota Department of Health and Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. If Minnesota is committed to ensuring it is the best state for our kids, it is time to prioritize electrifying our school bus fleet and safeguarding clean air for our children and communities. Along with free meals, let's please prioritize air free of harmful toxins for our children and school employees by supporting HF2502. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Roper, and thanks, CJ. And we have one additional testifier, Paula Thompson. Welcome to committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm Dr. Paula Thompson. I am a retired physician from Savage, Minnesota, and mother of 2, and a volunteer with MN350 South Metro. I just want to urge you all to take advantage of the money-saving opportunities that electric school buses represent. It is estimated that each electric school bus will save a school district upwards of $4,000 per year per school bus. This is fuel and maintenance savings, but we've heard quotes up to $11,000 per year. This could be a very significant money savings for school districts, especially when the federal funding right now, that we kind of missed out on this last year, this year there will also be $1 billion of that funding available. And schools can apply for up to 25 electric school buses at a time. And depending on the school district, they might be able to get every single school bus paid for with the federal government money and the charging structure paid for. When what we've noticed in our school districts, because we went and spoke repeatedly to school districts down in the South Metro, is they don't seem to, number one, understand that this is already taking place and that there are school districts all over, including in Minnesota, 8 school buses running. We had the first electric school bus in Minnesota in Lakeville in 2017, so we started off with a bang. It's been running. I believe State Senator Port's child rides that school bus. And so it works, it saves money. If you do the math, it could save a school district $100,000 a year if they happen to be able to get the 25 school buses. It also makes me want to imagine that if we distributed these buses widely and equitably throughout the state, the financial benefits could be part of an increasing and lasting financial stability for Minnesota schools, something especially needed in rural communities, tribal communities, and poor communities in the state. And those communities are prioritized in this bill. On the other hand, you could imagine a Minnesota in the future with increasing cost burdens because we continue to rely on burning fossil fuels to transport our students. We have over 13,000 buses in the state currently. Only about 12 of them are electric. Transitioning off of these diesel buses will go a long way to meeting our greenhouse goals. And I just feel it's time for Minnesota to accelerate this electrification of our school bus fleets, help schools take advantage of the financial savings that they will produce in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. And so we've got a few minutes for questions. Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just double checking, do we have a cost on the bill or what you're planning on? How much does the bus cost?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. With the DE amendment, we don't have a fiscal note on the DE yet, so we'll need to wait for that. And I would anticipate before choosing to include this in your omnibus bill, it would be fiscally responsible to get that note beforehand. But with the DE coming down pretty recently to get the bill in the shape that we wanted, we're still waiting on that.
And did you have a cost for one bus? Do we know what a bus costs?
Yes,
Yeah,
my testifiers know. I'm sorry, Chair. My testifiers do know that right off the top of their heads. So.
Dr.
Yes.
Tahana.
The cost of an electric school bus, depending on the size, can be upwards to $350,000 to $400,000. Diesel bus, $150,000. However, the total lifetime ownership gets close to parity when you consider what Dr. Thompson was saying, with the cost savings of fueling and maintenance of an electric bus compared to a diesel bus, $4,000 to $11,000 per year in savings over a 13-year lifespan of an average bus. it gets close to parity. And if you actually get the federal funds from the IIJA or a school gets funding through another means like a state-funded program, grant program, you will actually reap those savings because of the differential in cost savings with the maintenance and fueling.
Representative Swazinski? No? Next on the list, we have Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Chair Akam. Thank you, Representative Hansen, for bringing this bill. I think you know how much I love electric school buses. There was a couple of things I wanted to add that I think are really important when we consider this. So in addition to upper respiratory issues, diesel fumes are known carcinogens and lead to bladder and lung cancer. And that's stuff that we're exposing our kids to and drivers to every single day, as well as bystanders just in our communities where buses are sitting and idling. And so realistically, we are ending up paying for what happens to those individuals, especially when we talk about low-income areas where people have a tendency to go to emergency services as opposed to having regular checkups. And those costs get passed along to us, right? Like the community ends up paying for this. So just from a purely fiscal standpoint, I think there's a really good argument to be made for electrifying our school bus system. The other thing I wanted to point out is I think that there is an opportunity for us to look at Minnesota as figuring out how we can be electric school bus manufacturers. I know that we do have a manufacturing facility for electric buses, but I know that school buses have a much higher standard than our regular transportation buses, and I think that that's something that I would really love to have us explore in the area of economic development because, you know, this is coming and this could be a real moneymaker for the state of Minnesota. So thank you so much for bringing this. I appreciate your testifiers. I inherited this bill last biennium from Zach Stevenson, and I really want to see this get some money this time. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Next on the list is Representative Garofalo. And just to let people know, we've got 4 more, including Representative Garofalo, so we can be kind of quick. And 5.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As an electric vehicle owner for the last 9 years, I am aware of the benefits as well as the liabilities of being an electric vehicle owner. So for either the author or the testifiers, based on your knowledge, what do you believe the range of an electric bus is right now?
Dr. Trujano or Representative Dr. Trujano?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I've been attending the EPA Region 5 webinars pretty regularly. You know, Michigan has actually the most experience with electric buses over the past several years. And we have also spoken with local transportation directors and bus drivers. I believe the range currently is around 130 miles. Average bus routes are far less than that. So in the transportation directors and drivers we spoke with, they are not having any trouble at all covering the range in terms of the average routes of their buses.
Representative Garofalo?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to either, again, the author or the testifiers, how much, if we assume the 130 miles number, which we'll just assume that number for the sake of argument, how much range is diminished when, say, Minnesota is below 0? How much of that range is lost?
Dr. Trujano?
Yeah, there is certainly loss in range in cold weather. Probably the best answer I got was from Chaska School Districts, where they have a Bluebird electric bus. Their bus actually has an auxiliary diesel heater. So that's the heating of the bus does consume a lot of energy. But he actually measures the amount of diesel fuel used in terms of pints instead of gallons. So that can help offset that. Preheating the bus actually helps. And I believe he said somewhere, and this is our experience too with electric cars, somewhere around 20% reduction in range in the wintertime. They actually, and it is true, there is a reduction, and if you're going along the route, they actually said they kept it in the garage, I think, twice in the first year of use because of fear of range. But every other school day they used it.
Representative Garofalo?
So, Madam Chair, and to the testifiers, to stay warm on the buses, do they use the diesel heaters, propane heaters, or do they use electric heat for when the kids are on it?
Dr. Trujano?
It varies between the bus type. And like I said, the Bluebird bus that they were using used a diesel heater. I think others, I believe, do use propane heaters, and others use the pure electric heat, which, you know, if it's a cold winter, I'm sure that does decrease the range. But again, the range of the buses are in the currently, and this is current technology, and I'm sure they will increase over time, is 130 miles, which far exceeds the range of a normal bus route on average.
Did you have a final?
Whoa, no, actually, no, you can't. No, you can't.
Oh.
Thank you. So, Madam
Pat?
Chair, I'm doing you a favor there. So, so Madam Chair, and
Representative Garofalo, would you like a final question?
yes. So, and maybe this would be for the author of the bill. Assuming that somebody wants a bus to be electrified as the best way to reduce pollution, assuming that we're not one of the coldest states in the country, assuming that we're not using diesel to keep kids or to keep people on the bus warm. We're in school 8.5, to 9 months out of the year, 5 days a week. We have a transit system that runs essentially 365 days out of the year. If we're going to be making these sorts of spending on electric buses, wouldn't it make sense to invest in buses that are running 12 months out of the year as opposed to just part of the year?
Representative Hansen?
Thank you, Chair. I think the question is, should kids go to school 12 months a year? Is that what you're asking, Representative Garofalo?
No, Madam Chair, what I'm saying is that if we're going to be spending this sort of money on buses, does it make sense to invest in them in a way where in the months of June, July, and August, they're sitting idle, versus if we were to buy buses for Metro Transit and they would work 12 months out of the year? That way, whatever savings, whatever environmental benefits you're achieving, you're getting it for 100% of the year as opposed to 75% of the year.
Well, and I think I will just maybe say, I think one of the benefits of electric buses when they're not being used, that they can be used as energy storage, and then that storage can be deployed during times of peak use. So I think utilities are actually interested in looking at electric buses for that particular reason. Dr. Kahano, did you?
And if I may,
Yes.
I think the biggest advantage of using school buses is actually their intermittent use. And, charging a vehicle overnight is the most energy efficient, lowest cost, and most environmentally friendly way to charge. And if they charge a vehicle like an electric school bus overnight and use it for a limited purpose of, 60, 80, 100 miles, and then charge that again overnight, that is the most energy efficient and most environmentally friendly way to charge. In addition to what Chair Acom is saying, there are trials now of actually using vehicle-to-grid technology to use those school buses as storage. And think of a summer hot day when school's not in session. You can actually use those bus batteries as sort of peaker plants, non-fossil fuel peaker plants. And that is why utilities are interested in partnering with schools on these buses.
Thank you, Doctor. And let's see, we've got still 5 people on the list, so I'm going to ask that people can be quick, brief, and just ask one question. Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for the bill author, and it's about, subsection 2 on page 3 goes from 3.2 to 3.6, and then page 5, 5.5 to 5.7. It's talking a lot about encouraging schools to use vehicle electrification as a teaching tool. Can you just kind of give me a rundown of what your vision was for that, what it'll kind of be doing?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative Igo. I think as we raise kids in this world, it's important that we help them understand what that technology of the future looks like. We've talked a lot in the education spaces about doing, continuing education or any kind of service learning and service in the trades. And so exposing kids to understanding what these vehicles do and how it affects their health, I think is important. But I would also defer to my testifier who's working hands-on with a lot of communities to give you a more in-depth answer as well, if that's okay.
Briefly, Dr. Trajano.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of specifics on how specific schools are using that, but that is one of the things that Michigan schools are saying. We use these in classroom education on how they run, and I don't have a specific curriculum for that though.
Representative Hornstein.
Can I please, Madam Chair?
Briefly, Representative Igo.
Thank you. The point I was making and all that is obviously we don't have a supply chain for how we make these buses. It's coming from around the world, places that don't have environmental standards, labor standards. I think if we want to raise our children into a new economy that is aware of its surroundings and understands what happens when you flip a light switch on or you plug a bus in, we should know that we should be making it here and not being reliant around the world. Because otherwise, we're just going to destroy the world around us to say we have electric buses here. We can start teaching our kids about how important mining is in industry and manufacturing, and I would love to see that be a part of the bill today.
Representative Hornstein.
Just real quick, Madam Chair, thank you. It's more of a comment, no question. Big thanks to Representative Hansen for bringing this bill, and Representative Holland had made a point I wanted to make about cost and health, and it was a point that was made a lot by the first chair, I think, of this committee when it was called Climate and Energy, Representative Wagenius. And Representative Wagenius was also, I think, one of the first authors of this bill as well. So there's a whole chain of wonderful authors and chairs that have brought this forward. And so I'm channeling Representative Wagenius, and thank you so much again for bringing this bill and for hearing it, Madam Chair.
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Hansen, thank you for bringing this. Love this bill. Really going to say pretty much the same thing as Representative Hornstein. While I actually appreciate the emissions reductions in this, the side benefits are almost the main reasons to doing this. For the health of our kids, and we have a technology that can work, and on the long term is close to at parity. And I think our kids, the investment is worth it. Thank you.
And final question, Representative Davis.
Well, I have a question and a comment. I rarely speak in this committee, so I wish I had some more time. But Representative Garofalo actually asked a lot of my questions. And so I would just like to say, I think the point that Representative Garofalo was making, Madam Chair, was wouldn't it make more sense to invest in the Metro Transit, switching that to electric, as opposed to school buses? If you're trying to remove emissions out of the air, that would be a much more efficient way to go as far as that. I know of a school district that's already doing this, though. Crosby Ironton School District, in my district that I serve, they have 18 buses, school buses, and 12 of them are powered by propane. And what they find is that these buses start in over 40 below. They're incredibly reliable. They have 67% savings on fuel, and they're not putting harmful toxins into the environment. And incredibly reliable. They have 250,000 miles on one of their buses that they first purchased 10 years ago, and it's still running. Have we thought about that, switching to propane buses?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Representative. I think that's an idea that folks should explore. This program is definitely not mandatory for districts like yours who would like to continue to explore that sort of technology. We have just heard from a lot of districts who would like to explore this, and this is the path that we're going. But I think if you found a program that people would like to invest in, that sounds like a great bill idea to continue to reduce the diesel fumes that our kids are being exposed to, because that's the bigger goal. And again, if they start in 40 below, I mean, I'm a Minnesotan through and through, and I don't start in 40 below. So,
And I think I will just maybe just make a quick comment about the transit buses versus school buses. I think transit buses drive a lot longer routes, and so the range is actually more of a challenge because of that. But that's closing comments, Representative Hansen.
thank you, Chair, and thank you again, committee members. I really appreciate the discussion. I just want to say I encourage you to support this program. Feel free to reach out to me if there's any other questions. I know this came up kind of briefly, and we've only had a brief time to talk about it. But as we look at the future of what our kids need, as we look at making sure that Minnesota is the best place to live, work, and raise a family, and that we give all kids in Minnesota a great start, this is one of the ways we can do that. We cannot throw children under the bus as we fight for climate change. So thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. And with that, the bill is laid over.